Welcome to the Pasture-Raised podcast, episode 2. On this podcast, I'm hoping to learn from real farmers with different skills and perspectives in different contexts how they are building their farms that can sustain our families, our land, our communities, and our ecosystems. On episode 1, I went over exactly what my goals are for this podcast, and now in episode 2, we'll try to make good on some of those goals. If you don't know me, I'm Luke Gross of Gross Family Farm in southern Indiana. For the time being, I'll have my podcast notes or anything else about me you might want to check out at our website, grossfamilyfarm.com, spelled Groce. The podcast page link will be at the bottom of the page. If you want to learn more about me or my farm, feel free to go to our website or look up Gross Family Farm on Instagram or on Facebook. And if you want to contact me, info@grossfamilyfarm is the way to do it. I'll be happy to hear any feedback you might have from our first set of episodes, and if you'd like to share this around or provide a review, that would always be appreciated as well. I want to thank Dave for being on my first big interview episode. He's someone I've looked up to for a long time as a father, a farmer, a husband, an innovator, and a businessman. In this interview, we go over a whole host of things that he's doing on his farm, the hows and whens and whats and whys. We cover each of the species he's raising on his farm and get into some real details on his production and the way he's interfacing with his customers and his family to make a life on the land. I hope you get a chance to hear more of Dave and his wife Ginger in the future, but even before I get a chance to have them back, I do have an episode recapping the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association Conference, which included a tour of the Shields' farm. And it's a good thing I got that episode coming because of all the things Dave is exemplary at, his inventions on the farm are the thing he's probably most well known for in pastured poultry circles. So in this episode, we talk about nearly everything but those inventions. And that's partially by design because I do have that episode coming up. So stay tuned if you want to hear more about that. Without any further delay, I hope you enjoyed this interview I had with Dave Shields of Pastured Life Farm.
Dave, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
How's the weather in north central Florida?
Well, as someone from Indiana, you're probably going to be envious of our upper 70s that we have right now. But
Great.
Weather's been really nice, actually. We're still getting down into 30s and 40s right now, but farming in Florida is different. We're starting to gear up right now. And, honestly, we never really geared down from November, so we spent a lot of fall and winter, in pretty high production, and we try to come to a pretty solid stop sometime into spring.
Nice. That's great. Actually today it was 67 here today. It was very unseasonably.
Look at that. You guys,
you're not only that, but the sun was out. That's where it really was more like it.
So you guys, are you predominantly cloudy in your area, throughout the winter season, or?
We are, yeah. I mean, you can see the sun for sure. There'll be like a chilly day where you'll see the sun, or sometimes occasionally a day like this, but not having looked up statistics or anything, I'd say 60-70% of the days are going to be mostly cloudy or all the way cloudy through the winter.
Our biggest challenge where we are in Florida, most people that would be listening to this probably think, oh, Florida, they think beaches and sunny weather and whatnot. But really, our biggest challenge in Florida is where we are at. We're away from bodies of water influence, such as the Gulf and Atlantic Ocean. Mm-hmm. And that does a lot to regulate temperatures along the coast or within about 20 miles of the coast. And so where we're located, we have actually our weather, our temperature shifts are much like a desert. Like we'll get really cold at night, when it comes to, not so much in the summer, but, the winter months, fall, winter, and spring. We can get very cold at night, and then we can have a huge temperature shift. Like today, we shifted almost 45 degrees from our morning temperature up to our afternoon.
That's not so wonderful for chickens.
In fact, yesterday's shift was pretty significant, and we actually ended up having some piling occur in the brooder because of that. And it was happening so fast that you turn on lights or turn off lights, or you make some adjustments to ventilation and whatnot on your brooders, and the next thing you know, you're behind the 8 ball, and that gets to be an issue.
That's always something you're just going to have to be aware of, how your exact conditions are ever fluctuating.
Exactly.
Well, let's back out for a second. Why don't you, in your own words, tell us a little bit about who you and Ginger Shields are, and some about your whole family, and maybe how and why you got started in farming.
Well, I'm David Shields and my wife Ginger Shields. We farm together as a family. We started over 10 years ago. Honestly, I guess in spirit, we started more like 12 or 13 years ago when we realized as a family we wanted something a bit more than life in the suburbs. At one point in time, we lived in actually downtown Jacksonville. We were a part of the townie movement that was going on and trying to have the live, work, and play downtown concept go. And at that point, we just had a couple of kids. And, really, the more children we had, the more room we wanted, ironically. So I grew up, as a youngster, I grew up in Jacksonville in the suburbs. And really, the suburbs of Jacksonville was quite rural. Jacksonville was originally known as Calford, and so we actually were a huge livestock exchange at one point in our history. Wow. And so a lot of livestock went through Jacksonville. A lot of large dairies and meat and cow meat farms were in our area. In fact, a lot of the standing Sanford dairy farms, finally sold a lot of their properties, which makes a big part of Central Jacks now. Wow. But as we grew as a family, we started moving out to the suburbs. And again, we ran into the same issue, just not really feeling content with that. And we kind of had a pivotal point with my oldest son, had an assignment, had to determine where eggs came from. And, his answer ultimately was Publix, or in our case, Publix is a local grocery store. And so, we're like, oh boy, we really are failing teaching our kids about food. And so, and really where it comes from. And I at the time was kind of having a pivotal point in my life. A lot of this was back in 07, 08 when, there was quite a bit of fluctuation going on in the markets. And a lot of my consulting work was really drying up quite a bit at the time. So our revenue as a family really decreased quite a bit. It created a bit of personal, as a father and provider of my family, I was like, my purpose is to provide for my family. And that means they need to be able to eat, every day. And the only way I can guarantee that is if I'm growing food. And so that kind of shaped my initial mindset at that time. And then, fortunately, my wife was thinking a lot of the same way. So we spent 2 years looking for land out there in the country, trying to find the right place that we wanted to move to, which was a nice remote area that we could, raise food as a family. Of course, some of our guiding documents, among many things, is, we were probably one of the first owners of Pastured Poultry Profits. Back before it was a cool thing, we were thinking a lot about running chickens on ground. It wasn't something as so much as a business at the time, but it was more of a, hey, as a family, we would like to raise chicken, and this seems like a really neat way to do it. And we can, really encourage soil growth and grass, in an area that we're moving to that was relatively arid for Florida. Yeah. So that made a lot of sense to us. And, fast forward, a lot of friends, a lot of family that really liked the resulting products of the way we raised our meats, poultry and other animals alike. That kind of drove us into a business model that I honestly didn't expect. My background is I'm an IT guy, and I was consulting remotely as an IT guy from the farm. Mm-hmm. And over the years, that has decreased significantly, and so we're kind of at that transitioning point where, really the majority of my income comes from the farm these days, and IT work kind of helps fund those extra projects and things that we like to get done. Yeah. So, but now, we're growing over 10,000 birds a year on pasture and, raising over 100 pigs a year right now as a farm, and have a small dairy. We do some dairy products and some beef cow.
As I'm thinking and hearing kind of how you got started, I'm being reminded of this Wendell Berry quote where he says about both farming and marriage that the reasons one gets into a marriage or into a farm are not always the reasons one remains, and that the latter reasons will have to be discovered along the way. So, for anyone who's been married or farmed for a while, they kind of will probably know what he's talking about. But But for you, what are your, if those are the reasons you got started, what are your reasons now for still farming here a decade later?
Well, the more that we kind of reverse engineered our way into pastured farming, and let me explain.
Okay.
A lot of, when we were really trying to become independent and self-reliant when we moved out, and I wanted to do this in a wholesome environment with our family, in a way where we would have a better control over the influences in our lives and our children's lives, one guidance. And so when we were growing self-sufficiently, we realized that the only way we can raise animals without medicine or without steroids or whatever is they had to be healthy. And so we realized that, in order for things to be healthy, that meant we had to raise animals in a way that that didn't require it. And so that means moving animals and kind of mimicking their natural environments. And so that's kind of tailed us back into the way we farm today. But it also really became important to us that the health of our children, which was also related to the health of the animals and the food that they ate, was highly important. Like, we decided that early on, we're like, you know what, we may not be rich people, but if we leave our kids health, they'll be far better off than most people that have left their kids $1 million, because you could easily, in today's medical system, spend $1 million on your health. And so, unfortunately, and so that was really a huge guiding theme for us as a family was health and nutrient dense food and things that would benefit us minds and bodies, and and be real important to us. And so that was a guiding principle for us. And so and that even today is a huge part of what we do. Is a lot of our customers and people we work with are people that are sick, that are recovering, that need good food, need to get toxins out of their diet. And that's basically, I feel like a lot of these people, they're just extended family. We're just making more food to feed more people at our table.
That's great. Yeah, I always tell my customers that their kitchens and their tables are an extension of our farm. It's a complete system, and we couldn't do what we do without them. And we really believe that the way the piece of meat is handled in their kitchen is an important piece of how the end result we all want is going to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, no one in today's value system, as it is at least in the United States in the commodity food system, no one would pay the price for the type of food we produce. So what we have are our partner patrons, are our supporters of our farm that pay what is needed for it to be a sustainable business as a family to produce it, and for them to be able to have access to these ingredients in their home.
Yeah, that's great. Well said. Getting back to the details of Pasture Life Farm, how many acres have you guys got? And then beyond what you mentioned earlier, are there any other products you're producing on your farm as well?
So the majority of our operation occurs on our home 20 acres that we have. And then we have another 20 acres that we lease. Actually, I'd say that was closer. We have another 10 in addition to that. So there's 30 that we lease. And we actually have access to quite a bit more land based on we're trying to grow our beef herd. Beef is definitely a product that's really getting a lot of interest. And you got to really grow your poultry production. Really has to echo your soil condition. And where we are in Florida, we're very light loam, a sandy loam soil, and so our manure load is really high. So we can grow a lot of chicken on pasture, per acre. And so, and that's why we've kept it down. We have the opportunity to expand quite a bit land base wise. But, on 20 acres, I'm able to do, I've calculated about 15,000 meat birds and probably about 1,500 or so layers just in that area.
Wow.
And on a good rotation. And so, and it's just because our soil is so deprived of nutrients that it basically is like growing in hydroponics. I mean, we basically have sand, which is our medium,
Right.
and we're essentially adding all the nutrients for our forage. So,
Yeah.
and
adding carbon too, that's probably missing as well in that soil.
Yeah, oh yeah, and so now my ability to raise that many animals on that amount of acreage will decrease slowly over time as our organic matter increases, and so our load capacity will decrease, and we'll need to spread out more. So essentially, as we heal the land, we'll be spending less time, but I can increase then my herbivore activity at that point in time.
Sure. And then there's more land in your neighborhood as well, so you're not necessarily going to drop your production or anything like that.
Yeah, I probably, within a mile, I have access to over 80 acres that I can expand our poultry and beef operation on. So there's plenty of land to grow into, and it's probably more than that. But that's just people I know.
Just current offers or
yeah, I mean, people literally are like, "Hey, would you do this on my land?"
That's great.
They see what we do and they're like, "Would you?" And that doesn't include any adjoining land that we have access to.
Yeah. Sometimes I talk to folks all over the country, and I wonder if the variations that I hear in terms of how many offers there are or might be for rental land opportunities. I sometimes wonder how much it has to do with the reputation of the person who's farming regeneratively and looking for more land in their neck of the woods. And yeah, reputation in terms of how long they've had to build that reputation or how well they built it. And they could be a lot that, but then there's also like all the cultural things going on and what the land's currently being used for too. If you're in a big row crop area, all those things are going to play a factor for sure. And I feel like I hear the gamut of hypotheses in terms of what the reasons are.
They're all very personal. I mean, honestly, I mean, the land is owned by someone, and that person has a vision of what they want to happen.
Yeah,
and you got to fit that vision.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You got broilers, you got milk cows, eggs, pork, beef, turkey, duck, and I think on your website you're selling rabbit. Is there anything else I'm missing there?
Yeah. We kind of, I think like a lot of guys, we got excited and did it all.
Guilty over here too.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it sounds like fun. Honey, I'm coming home with pigs, or honey, I'm coming home with turkeys.
That's great. No small ruminants though. No goats or sheep.
Oh, I might try sheep, but I did try goats, and you have to be a special individual to master the goats, especially when you have as many species running. Goats are the only animal that I'm aware of that never is happy where you have them, and is only happy to be where you don't want them. And now Florida is a difficult place for small ruminants just because our our worm loads and a lot of our forage is way higher. We don't have the die-offs or any of that stuff that you have up north. And so, it's really difficult to raise goat or sheep without some sort of help. And so there's a lot of natural ways that you can do it. And I've known a lot of people to do it, but normally raising goat or sheep requires that you start with a very large herd, say 200 or so, and you ruthlessly cull that herd. And so you might end up with 50 healthy animals after that first year. That's how bad the die-off would be.
It's brutal.
Exactly. And so, and then you finally have something to work with, and I didn't want to go through that. Yeah. And I just felt like, there's way too much opportunity in poultry and pork, just meats that people recognize and use more frequently in our area, at least. And meat is different everywhere you go. There's a lot of ethnic groups that are really interested in lamb and goat, but it's not strong enough for me to want to raise it.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So who are you marketing all your meat and eggs and dairy to?
Well, we are almost 100% direct customer out of all of our operation. I mean, we have one restaurant that we actually supply. And funny story, I get a lot of calls from restaurants, and I honestly tell most of them that we're not interested in wholesale. And I always explain to them, I was like, listen, and this is a tendency. A lot of farms want to sell a lot of wholesale.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, I said, listen, this is a craft. This is a product that we spend a lot of time raising. And if you buy 100 or 500 of this particular item, my time and effort is still the same regardless. I'm not building something for commodity raising. I'm building something that has a dedicated amount of time and effort. And so and frankly, I have families that probably, in some of the very few wholesale accounts that we had, I have families that probably bought more than those wholesale. I really, truthfully enjoy being able to grow product, hand it to someone that I know is going to use it, and have that connection. And it's just, something that I think is extremely valuable. And when the supporter, as I kind of like to call them, or our patrons, they're so willing to try so many different things. If I had a wholesale account, for an example, a store, and all they want to do is sell chicken breasts and eggs, well, that's probably about all they'll ever get from me. But if I have instead, 100 customers in place of that wholesale account, and I say, you know what, I had this new sausage we just tried. It's really good. Y'all should try it. Well, guess what? Almost all of them will order some.
That's great.
And it's just a whole different experience when you have that type of relationship. And it goes back to my initial goal, which was to create a family business. Because, when you have people that support your farm, ultimately they're buying product from you. They're buying it from Dave and Ginger and their kids, and they love hearing about that. And then when my kids start developing strong interests, I have kids that are really into carpentry and blacksmithing, dressmaking, and all these different things. They want to support now their endeavors as well. So now we're building a base of supporters that really like what we're trying to do and accomplish in a community and want to support it. So now it becomes this opportunity for our kids. If they don't spend 100% of their time saying, well, I'm not going to farm for the rest of my life, I'm going to become a carpenter. Well, guess what? They have a built-in group of people that would love to support them in their life endeavors. And
that's exciting.
And so that's what I really like about having this type of connection with our customer, is it opens them up to everything we do and everything that our kids want to do. Because it becomes a relationship, not just someone going to a store to buy my breast.
That's great. Now, your customers, they're sort of spread out all across North, Central, Northeast Florida. Is that right?
That's right.
And so it's a beautiful picture you paint. How are you keeping those connections between your whole family and your whole customer base so well?
There's a lot of aspects to that. And part of it is the way that we deliver most of our food is through a kind of a drop point system, or co-op buying, or buying club, I guess you can call it. And, I go and travel a route myself personally. In fact, my largest route is in Jacksonville. My children, 4 of them, at least 4 of the 6, actually come with me every delivery route.
Wow.
And we travel that route, and we make our deliveries at certain points at certain times every week. And so my customers can count on that, and they plan their days around it, their shopping trips around it. And they meet us at those locations, and each drop is almost like a small social gathering, customers that have gotten to know each other, and keeping up with what we have going on and talking to the kids. Honestly, I really enjoy how much time the kids spend talking to all of them, just because they all are interested in what they're doing. And so that route and that kind of I guess engagement has developed a really nice kind of close-knit group of people that stay up with us. And so we go weekly to Jacksonville, our Northeast Florida route, and to St. Augustine. And then we travel into south of us once a week down, or twice a month down to Gainesville, and also to Madison, which is out towards Tallahassee, and Orlando once a month. So
wow,
these are routes that we all run as a family. Not all together. Like our longer routes, like down to Orlando, might be just my wife and I.
okay.
But again, we plan them in such a way that they don't take away so much time, because if you think about it, you can spend almost a whole day at a farmer's market, and I can spend just as much time, but I can hit 6 or 7 different locations and come to convenient places where I am literally going into town, and I have specific orders for what people want. And so I come with full coolers and I come home with nothing.
That's amazing.
So that's a great, to me, that's a great way to sell. And I explain to my customers, it's really supportive of our farm and what we do by allowing us to, deliver that way.
That's great. Yeah, I when you do the math on how many hours it takes to pack up for a farmer's market and to drive there, unload, set up, run the market, break down, pack up, drive home, pack it all back in, on top of anything else you have to do, it's a full day for sure. And there's always the big question mark: will my sales be terrible or will it be wonderful? I can have a decent idea of that, but nothing's guaranteed. So it's nice knowing precisely what to bring, not having a cooler full of chicken breasts when all you need is a chicken thigh.
Right. Yeah. Well, and truth be told, we have one market that we attend, and the only reason why we attend it is we have one Saturday route that we run twice a month, which is kind of our St. Augustine beaches route. And so we had a lot of customers in St. Augustine, so we're like, well, let's just pair it up with a market that we know is a decent market.
Yeah.
And we'll do our drop point there, but also have some a la carte sales available. But even that being said, even with it being probably one of the better markets in our area, I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of our sales are pre-sales for order pickups, and about 1/4 of our revenue is just walk-up sales at the market.
I suppose that you could always use that walk-up sale as hopefully a chance to bring that person into the fold where they'll become a person buying ahead.
That's precisely what I use it for. And what has been beautiful, because what I do is I intentionally bring not a wide selection of things. I bring a selection of probably more popular items.
Yeah.
And then I always say, with the caveat, and I love it when people are picking up orders because it always allows for this, is
right.
I have so many different items that I can provide you that are just not feasible for me to bring because I just don't know what you want today. But right. You can be guaranteed to have not only the eggs that I sell out of every market, but the meat that you would like, or the backs that you would like for broth or whatever, things that are too bulky for me to bring,
sure.
if you order in advance. And so this has been a great way for most of these walk-up customers that I used to have that now pre-order and then just kind of pick up their things and we talk. And now it's more social. And now I'm there hanging out and talking to people, handing them bags, and not running transactions, because that's another limit at a farmer's market is people
Absolutely.
having quality time to pick a product, and then have that transaction,
Yeah.
And now they don't have to think about it or worry about it or feel stressed about it. They just kind of come and hang out and talk and ask a couple questions and grab their things and go.
Yeah, that's great. And it closely mirrors kind of our experience. We have a CSA program that's quite a bit different, but we distribute it at our farmers markets, and 60-70% of the sales at that market are already pre-sold and in the cooler on the truck. And I couldn't even make those sales even if the people were there in that amount of time because I couldn't manage the transactions by myself.
Exactly. There's a transaction limit, like number of transactions per hour you can incur.
Right.
And there's only so many peak hours in a market where you would have
Sure.
that volume.
Yeah, I think it's a great move, and I think it's a great way to keep farmers markets working as your scale goes up, to sort of use it as a drop point for pre-sales of one kind or another. I think it makes a lot of sense. If we could shift gears again, maybe I'd just kind of like to chat with you some about your production. I know you've been producing a lot of things on your acreage there over the years, and you're a smart fella who's probably got reasons for doing things the way you do them in a way that we could dive deep into, and then we could probably just go all night chewing the fat. But
Absolutely.
I'll try to keep it to a shorter list. So one of those questions I've got is, you're one of the farmers who I know who employs seeding in your pastures more than myself and many other folks I talk to. Can you just kind of tell me about that strategy? What are you seeding? When? Why are you seeding? And where are you at with seeding annuals and perennials?
If you came to my farm and you looked at our processing facility, I'm not sure if you were in there for our conversation on processing.
Yes, I was there for that. Yeah.
Okay. We had so many people packed in there. I was having a hard time seeing who was there.
I think I was standing right on your side. I was probably breathing down your neck because we were so packed in tight. But go ahead.
Yeah, that day was a blur.
I'm sure it was.
So in the beginning, before I really truly understood and grasped the whole idea of a multi-seed cover cropping approach, to soil creation, I was actually hydroponically growing forage for our animals. We were growing barley, sprouting barley at pretty massive degree. That particular building's original purpose was to grow and produce barley at a tune to close to 1,000 pounds a day.
Wow.
We were growing 1,000 pounds of 7-day sprouted barley.
Wow.
So at any given time, we would have 6 other days of planted barley. So you could do the math and realize, how massive that operation was.
That's a lot of water and, I assume, lights and seeds and trays. And
pretty significant undertaking and very time consuming. It occurred to me, through a lot of the complications we would have, we weren't building on anything. We were taking the sprouts out of a tray, cleaning it, replanting it. There was no building of anything. And so it occurred to me that we needed a return on our time and effort for it to be worth it. And the only way that would pan out was to plant in the pastures where we could actually improve our pasture grazing qualities. And so I'm thinking at that point in time where I'm wanting to do a multi-species pasture plantings. And so we went into I guess you can say a fall planting pattern into a spring-summer planting pattern. So part of it was that since we're, as I joked about earlier, is we're kind of growing in hydroponic media and sand in Florida, or sometimes we like to say we're farming a beach. I need to be able to use up excess nutrients in the soil. And one of the ways to do that, obviously, is to plant things that will use those nutrients up. And so, in the winter and fall, after we've had a pretty heavy spring season, we were planting a lot of grasses and radish, broadleaves, brassicas. Kale is something I really love. The chickens devour kale. So do cows.
Yeah.
But these are things that use up a lot of nitrogen. And so it's a way for me to control that, in our soil. And the same thing in the summer, I can, plant kind of sorghums and, Sudan style grasses, things that, again, that are kind of broad grasses that will, again, use up a lot of nitrogen. And so we don't necessarily have a nitrogen load issue, but it's just things that I find that, planting a legume, since, for an example, doesn't necessarily offer me much, because we have plenty of nitrogen.
Right.
And so we, we'll plant them, but not as heavily. And so that is really what's driven a lot of our planting, is really just one, we want nutrition for the animals. We want forage, high quality forage that they can eat. And two, something that's going to do something with all that fertility we're leaving behind, as we pull our broilers through the fields and as we move our layers around and flock our turkeys around, is basically, something to utilize that.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that's the cool thing about it is we're, as we're building up our organic matter, which, if you compare it to northern soils and prairie soils like up your way, it's a joke. But now we're actually getting some moisture retention, so we can get better germination. So each year we're getting better germination, in areas that even with low rain, and so I think, I look at that as exciting, and it's something I can replicate anywhere we go. It's something that I didn't understand in the beginning, didn't really quite, again, 10 years ago, there wasn't much about farming in Florida. A lot of it was coming out of Virginia, of course, Joel Salatin and, Greg Judy and guys like that had way different soil than we did. And so I followed a lot of that in the beginning, but it just wasn't effective for what we had going on in Florida.
How do you apply the seed to the soil? What tools are you using to either spread it or get the contact or drill it in?
So basically, I honestly just use a conical spreader. So I'm not currently using a no-till seed drill. I would like to eventually move to that, but I honestly just increase my application rate by 25% to the acre and just put down seeds via broadcast. And I typically, if there's any soil exposure, or I should say not a lot of soil exposure, I might use a chain drag just to kind of like rough it up a bit with the seed. But, not any sort of harrowing or anything to that effect.
Sure.
But, there's actually some real interesting science coming out in our area where in our type of soils, if you harrow with an immediate planting, that you're not losing a lot of your organic matter, I guess you can say your momentum. But the key is you have to have a really quick germination after that. So you kind of have to always have something green and growing, at all times. But I don't really follow that. I'm really trying to establish our perennial pasture system, and then, during die off in the winter, so plant, things that will complement it and provide more organic matter for our spring start. The only negative is, a very common, perennial pasture grass in Florida is Bahia, and Pensacola Bahia, which has great nutrition levels as a grass, is terrible as a hay. It's almost like an anti-nutrition. And then in addition to that, the root system is allelopathic. So it actually fights off the germination of other plants within those pastures during the summer. And so if I'm going to plant anything that I would like to grow, I really have to heavy graze, and stunt that grass to try and get any sort of germination. So I'm trying to move as much as nature will allow me towards coastal grasses. I feel like they're definitely more suited for that, better for interplanting than a Bahia grass is. But I'm not gonna really take any significant effort to try and replace it. I'm just gonna let selection go. But I feel like the coastal grasses, because of the higher nitrogen load, are really starting to take over in some areas.
That's great. Is there a dormant season with either the Bahia or the coastal Bermuda or whatever other coastal grasses you got?
Yeah, that's the other negative is they're dormant. They are nutrient for about 3 to 4 months out of the year and provide really no good values after that. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge challenge. So people always, I love hearing this. It always makes me laugh. Oh, you live in Florida, you can grow grass year round. You're so lucky. And I'm like, you don't know half of it. We can grow grass that makes our cows grow about 3 to 4 months out of the year. Outside of that, you got to plant something that's gonna feed them, or you're gonna have to provide some sort of protein of some kind to get their overall protein intake, or you need it, so they can put on weight.
Yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
Oh yeah, it's big.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to chat about broilers some. It's your centerpiece operation. You guys are raising about 10,000. Can you tell me what strain of Cornish cross are you raising, and where do you get them from?
Basically, we use currently the Cobb 500. We're getting them from APPPA, which not directly. We actually have some good friends of ours in South Georgia, Bob and Diane, that hatch eggs for us.
Okay.
And they deliver them down to our farm, so they don't go in the mail, which is a great thing.
That's great.
And then we, after they arrive here, we, of course, like all good pastured farms or any farm for that matter, we we run them through the brooders depending upon the time of year. We can get them out as early as 2 weeks or sooner in the late spring, early summer. But we like to, we don't really like to have any adult birds during the months of July, August, and September. And so typically we're finished brooding by, April, early May.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
trying to finish up by June. And so that keeps our brooding times probably averaging 2 to 3 weeks. Wintertime, we can go as far as 4, depending upon how cold it is. And believe it or not, we get cold occasionally. And so, we need to actually, keep those guys in the brooders a little bit longer just to make sure they're hardened off properly. But that's a challenge, and that's, every area is different when it comes to the brooding, but that's, ours is just huge temperature fluctuations. So we kind of have to be ready for everything.
Yeah, makes sense. And so with the Cobb 500, what do you like about that particular strain? What caused you to settle with those?
Well, their meat distribution is pretty decent. I mean, we find, and again, a lot of the Cornish cross strains are, really similar on their
Sure.
profiles. Now there are some heritage varieties. Obviously, you have. When I say heritage, we jokingly call the red broiler the orangish cross, because it's almost as many combinations genetically as the Cornish cross, just slightly different parentage to get
Yeah.
more
No,
of
it's a hybrid for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a hybrid. It's not something that produces on its own. The only bird that we've come across that we really like is the Sasso / naked neck, or the Poulet Rouge variety of bird,
Okay.
or the turdunkins, or the Turkins. I'm sorry.
Right.
And that's been a great bird. We've actually successfully run those in our hot summers, and was one of the reasons why we looked at them, is we wanted to have something that we could potentially run during that time of year, so we could actually start those guys in June, for an example, and harvest them in July, August, and not have a problem with the heat. They've been a great slower grow bird that we've used, and that's been a good solution for the customers of ours that are looking for that kind of poultry.
So when you compare that to a Freedom Ranger, we've done a fair bit of Freedom Rangers. Let's say you get the Freedom Rangers all males, and in 10 weeks we can get a 4.5 plus pound carcass reliably. What do you find you can get with a Sasso naked neck?
So our males are probably closer to 12 weeks.
Okay.
10 to 12, depending upon how well they are growing. But our males are going to be in that 4.5 pound range, and our females will be in that 3.5 pound range. So it's a straight run.
Sure. Yeah.
And so, again, which is a great size for that kind of bird, just how it's going to be used
for someone who's looking for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so obviously we're not cutting it up. We're not, we're not parting it out, and it's, we're selling it as a whole bird. And so, I like it because it's one of those, breed true birds where you could technically, breed them, if you
Sure.
wanted to. I always think about sustainability, one of our original founding principles as a farm. I think about things like that. Well, gee, if I can't get my hands on some Cornish cross strains, what are we going to grow? That starts a whole other conversation we could have. Wouldn't probably spend the entire night talking about, birds that breed true that we could grow as a 12 to 14 week meat bird, and so. Unfortunately, that's not where customers are at.
Sure.
As much as I like the idea as a farmer and someone that's into it, I just, I got to grow what the customer wants. On the end of the day, if I want to be a business and be successful, I can't tell the customers what they want. I got to respond to what they do want and what they're familiar with. And so the majority of what we grow, I may only grow a few hundred, the heritage birds, 3, 4, 500 of those a year, versus 10,000 of the Cornish cross.
If it's Publix you're competing with, and whatever bird that's sitting there in the case, if someone's not looking for that, they're looking for something that is going to be as close to that in price and carcass appearance as we can get, and it's just an even smaller subset of that alternative buyer who's going to be actually looking to spend even more for something even smaller and that looks much less recognizable.
On the end of the day, poultry is an ends to the means of better soil. A Cornish cross poops just as well as a heritage, and it's just, that's, to me, is what we're using them for. Is we're trying to jumpstart our soils, organic matter production, so we can support other species, with less feed intake. And so I look at that as a great piece of this, and it's not just the bird and the meat that we sell, but the other component, the ecology part of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You're processing those Cornish a couple times a week for like 35 weeks or something like that. What's it look like for you guys in terms of a weekly or yearly schedule?
So that's the cool thing about being a PL90 processor and processing on farm, is we don't have to process to anybody's schedule. We process based kind of on production. And so we might have weeks where we process, 400 to 500 birds, or we might have weeks where we hold off birds and then we only process 100 or 150 birds. Like right now, I probably have 2,500 birds on the farm, meat birds right now. And we literally processed 65 birds today because that was all that was ready. When normally we would have processed, 300 to 400 this, today. And so that little cold snap we had at the conference, impacted our grow outs. And so that's what ends up happening is we'll harvest part from one group and part from the next group. And so that makes our what we harvest very variable. We will sometimes harvest just once a week. Sometimes we'll harvest once every other week, or sometimes we'll harvest twice in 1 week.
Gotcha.
and so basically we are really reflecting what's ready in the field. And so if it was my preference, I would love to have larger harvests every other week, because again, when you harvest on farm, there's a lot of effort involved with that. Harvesting the bird is not the hard part. We can process at a pretty good clip. When everybody's motivated and things are working well, we typically pretty easily maintain close to 150 an hour, going for a kill. And so,
so it's not an all-day thing for your family.
No, not at all.
Right.
It's, we could, 400 birds we'll have done before lunch, and it's not a big deal to do that. Our limit normally comes in refrigeration, or we actually ice bath. That's how we hold our birds for packaging. And so that's a lot of ice. So 2 to 3 pounds of bird. When you look at that, that adds up pretty quick. 200 birds, for an example. You'll easily be in the 500 to 600 pound category of ice, at least in Florida.
Right.
And so it might be less up north because your well water's, a lot cooler than ours.
That makes sense. You got to get the BTUs out of the bird.
That's right.
If we could just shift to your milk cows, I really love really good quality raw milk, and we would definitely have a cow if we didn't have Amish neighbors who sold a gallon for $2.50 to us. So
that's amazing.
We're richly blessed.
I would be in your shoes.
Yeah.
We would happily buy milk at $2.50.
If they ever move out of the neighborhood, we will buy their cow off of them and ask them to teach our kids how to milk, and we'll just figure it out from there. But until such a time, we'll go down the hill and get milk once a week from them. So are you milking 100% grass-fed animals, and how many girls are you milking? And tell me a little bit more about that and how you got into it. Some even maybe.
Well, the milking cow was probably the very first thing we really took on. We've raised layers in the very beginning, milking cow is probably the very first thing that we did as a family. And so my wife and I used to milk the cows together. She would milk one side, I'd milk the other, and the other. We would, it would take us about 15 to 20 minutes a cow to milk them out by hand. It's pretty time consuming by hand, and honestly, I feel like long term, there's probably a lot of issues with doing that by hand. At least on yourselves. I mean, I'm really, I have to think about the wear and tear, especially when you're farming as a family. I mean, you don't want your kids having joint issues that 50-year-olds have at 18 and 20, and so you got to think about these things when you make your production and you start building your workflows on your farm. So we quickly went to a milking machine with our cows. They are grass fed. And so in Florida, this time of year, for an example, until we get them, we're just now getting ready to get them onto some of our annuals. But, boy, we'd be down to a half a gallon to a gallon of cow, without, just on hay and alfalfa. We're milking just once a day.
Okay.
And so we really don't push for high production. I mean, our model is long life for the cow, so we can have 12 to 14 freshenings, and we can milk them, once a day. See, a cow, if you think about it, a cow produces a fixed amount of nutrients on a daily basis, regardless of their milk volume. And so when you have a cow that's a high producer, that the minerals and nutrients that go into that milk is obviously watered down. And so you're just getting a much more potent nutrient package, so to speak, when you're grass feeding, and you get a much lower production. And when you're milking once a day, I mean, we're milking for nutrition, not for volume. And
that's great.
So that's kind of really what we go for when we're milking cows. I need a ruminant to eat the forages that are being produced by the manures, from our poultry operation. And I always jokingly like to say that we're grass fed, but we're grain fed once removed. Meaning our chickens ate the grains,
right?
And they defecated in the field and grew grass.
Pretty big transformation.
We've processed the grain through a chicken before the cow ate it.
A chicken and a grass plant.
Yeah, and a plant.
and microorganisms as well. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things went into that.
Yeah.
And so,
it's a good long chain.
Yeah, it's the proper chain. And so that's so really that's why we have the dairy. It was a great way for us to eat the grass. Now, if I were a person getting started at this, I would not recommend a dairy cow. I would recommend a beef cow until you got comfortable with handling the cattle, and then look at adding a dairy cow. The dairy has been on the chopping block multiple times for us.
Wow.
But it's always come back to, man, we really like the milk, and we like the products that we make with the milk. And we have customers that that use these products and really are a commodity, not a commodity, but a staple that they purchase regularly, which also lead to other purchases. So
sure,
we kind of have to look at it differently. But yeah, the milking operation, again, it takes a couple good years of trial and error for you to get it right, but it's a blessing too. I mean, it's a blessing, but you got to milk those cows every day. Now, the cool thing is when you milk them once a day, it leaves you a lot more time. Milking 2 to 3 times a day is definitely an industry thing. It's not something you would, if you're really worried about the longevity and the health of that cow. I feel like once a day milking, it's the way to go.
Great.
But you're not going to get the volume. You're not going to get 3, 4, or 5 gallons that you might get on a grass-fed cow.
Right.
In the right region and climate with the right type of forage.
Right. Do you all do calf sharing, or do you separate out the calves?
So we separate the calves. So at a certain age, we'll start splitting the calf off at night.
Okay.
And so normally the cows are down at night. Typically they're laying and sleeping.
Sure.
If you time it right, you could probably honestly get the cows out of the pasture before the calves wake up
For the cat nurse.
and
Yeah.
milk them and then put them back in. But we typically kind of do, 12 on, 12 off with the calves as they get older, and it works pretty well. The negative is, some mama cows will hold back the cream, save it for the calf, um, but that's just, par for the course. And we explain that to any customers or anybody that buy that milk. We're like, listen, the cream line changes for a reason, and this is why. And then, when we explain that and they realize that they're sharing this with calves, they're like, oh, that's, I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah. How cruel can you be?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do you really want me to starve this poor calf? And,
Should see its big, gorgeous eyes.
yeah, exactly. And once you explain that to them, then they become very understanding, oh, okay, that's why that changes, and so, yeah, that's exactly right.
That's great. How many cows are you milking right now?
So we have, I would say about 12 jerseys. And on any given time, we might be milking, anywhere from 3 to 5.
So switching over to pigs, do you guys farrow your own piglet?
Yes, we do. Currently, we have about 6 sows and a boar, and we farrow about twice a year on average per sow.
Okay.
And so, and we probably end up on average with about, 10 to 12 piglets. We've had some mamas wean up to 17, which is incredible.
Wow.
And we've had some hang at that 7 to 10 range, and we only do that a few times before we like to try and have 10 to 12 on average weaned by moms. And so, but yeah, it's a whole nother level of complication. Again, sure. If I had someone that kind of grew them consistently and I could have them whenever I would kind of need them on a schedule or whatnot, because sometimes it's hard to know what you need and you don't need.
Sure.
I would be potentially interested in just buying growers, but yeah. But our genetic, is almost 11 years old now. So, we've been breeding and introducing genetics into our herd, and we have really great meat quality, primarily Berkshire, and we hybrid into, via the sows. We bring in Old Spot and Chester White into the herd.
Great.
And so that's really given us some great hybrids. I think our best pigs, our best growers are our 3/4 Berk to a quarter Old Spot. We really, really like those pigs. But it's taken time to get there and see that trend, because, pigs, you have 10 to 12 months. So it takes a while to see that play out in your meats and production and their gains.
What's it like raising pigs in a sandy situation? I mean, in terms of their wallows, how big of a hole can they even dig if the sand, like my kids at the beach? I mean,
yeah.
What's it capable of?
Well, there's loam in our sand, so I don't want to make it sound like it's like a beach entirely. I don't want to make it sound terrible. But if you think about it, because it's a sandier loam, our parasite issues with pigs are very, very, very minimal.
That's great.
Because we don't have water retention, we don't have mosquitoes, which is unusual. You don't hear that in Florida very often, but where we are, we don't have mosquitoes in our area. And so, so it's actually really unique. The lower moistures in the soils really lend towards, I think, from a health standpoint, it's, we really just don't have any health issues with our pigs. So we can have a wallow. The way we administer water to our pigs, a lot of people have drinking systems and whatnot. We literally use drip irrigation, and we have water dripping in multiple areas throughout their, wherever they are currently in their growing paddocks. And so we have constant water dripping. Pigs are very smart, very sanitary. They know to drink at the source, and they wallow downstream.
That's great.
And so we've had really great success with that. very little issue or sickness or anything associated with that. Now, if I had a clay base and we had a problem with shedding water, I don't think I would do that, and I could see there being issues. But this is an unfair advantage we have, so I use it. One of the few with sand.
Right.
And so, so yeah, I find that they do great with it. I mean, it's just, and it's real interesting. I mean, they can take especially this time of year, they can take our sand down and it looks like the surface of the moon, and then spring hits in these areas that they were in, they just completely, sometimes it's disheartening, and then all of a sudden spring hits and there's this super lush paddock that comes back. I've driven in there with my tractor before and just had it over the fenders of my tractor. I'm like, holy cow, and it's just amazing.
Are you seeding those paddocks too?
Actually, no. This is just natural grasses, vines, brush, different things that's coming back. I've intentionally have avoided seeding the pig paddocks for that reason. Now, sometimes I'll put barley down in the winter, if I'm getting enough rain. And I like to plant barley because I think it's a great forage for the pigs. But in the summers, there's so many different things that we have come up, in our paddocks. I might go in there and plant some sorghums or corn or things like that, if I feel like I need to do that, or if I know I'm going to have plenty of, precipitation. But if I don't feel like I'm going to have that, I just kind of let the paddocks come back on their own, and it's always neat to see how that changes each year with the pigs.
That makes sense. I guess a late summer hurricane's a chance to get some germination before all the moisture leaves the soil.
Yeah,
it's a guaranteed week of rain.
I mean, if it just, people can't really wrap their mind around like how much water we get, and we had one particular month, one summer where we had 2 tropical storms back to back, and we had 64 inches of rain.
Oh gosh.
But
that's when you're glad you got sand.
So 64 inches of rain did not amount to much accumulation. I mean, we had some flooding and some area flooding in some parts of our, land and pastures. But it was gone within 24 hours. And
wow,
there's an interesting thing that occurs when we get a very large amount of rain in that short period of time. You got to think about it. We have this column of water, right, that is passing down through our soil, all across a large plain. Yeah. And as that passes down, it actually creates like a surface suction as it moves down through the sand. Because it's not hitting a clay layer or some sort of layer to stop it. And so, I'm sand 40, 50 feet down until it gets into our aquifer. And so I can actually be dry within a day after that type of rain.
That's amazing.
And so it's a real interesting phenomena that I've observed in our area, specifically in sandy regions. And it just, again, you just got to think about it. I mean, you have all that water just pushing down. And as it pushes down as a plane across that region, you're creating basically ground suction from the surface as that column moves down. And that's part of why we're such a high recharge area. Suwannee County, where we're in Florida, is one of the highest recharge areas for our aquifer.
That aquifer is so abundant. That's why all those companies are sucking all the water out of the ground down south.
Oh, I know. They're constantly, all the bottled water, that's coming out of our ground is amazing. And it's from that recharge rate that we have that we see that export, unfortunately.
I hope that there's enough for everybody. I haven't looked too closely into that, but I hear they're pumping a whole lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd be curious to talk about ducks and rabbits if we have time, but on the turkeys, one of the things I know you're known for is raising them year round and selling them year round. And
yes,
a pasture turkey is a beautiful thing, and everybody who's ever raised one loves hanging out with them. It's just such a pleasant human being to get to spend your morning with.
Yeah.
How do you sell a turkey throughout the year, and what do your customers think of the products you're selling them, and what are those products?
So turkeys are amazing, and Florida's got really great terrain for turkeys. Since we don't have snow or frozen ground like you do up north, right. The ability for a turkey to forage, I like to akin them to cows. Yeah. When we bring turkeys into a paddock, they'll, as a group, graze the paddock down to a level. If you leave them there, they'll come back and graze it down again a bit more, and then a bit more. And it's really very similar to the way cows are if you leave them in a paddock for a period of time. And and so I really like that about turkeys, because again, it's a non-herbivore that I can use to graze pretty significantly more than chickens will. I mean, turkeys are the grazers extreme. They'll eat acorn like crazy. They'll eat grass and forages like crazy. And they're just they're magical at a certain point in age. They just start eating less and less on a daily basis, and they just start eating more forage. And so that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy the turkey, with the personality being, of course, their crowning achievement. I like to call the turkey our unfeathered, or our feathered pig, in the sense that they're very much like our pigs in personality in a lot of ways, and very curious, very friendly. One of the only animals on a farm that's happy to see you. Most people that raise chickens know how chickens are. They like to get away from you typically, and they're not so social. They can be. I mean, like, layers are, a layer that's been around for a while and knows you will come up to you. But a meat bird that's 8 to 10 or 12 weeks old, they just don't get used to you. and so, but turkeys do. And so it was actually through the one restaurant that I mentioned to you that we do sell to, that we actually came to raising turkeys year round. And part of it is we actually would raise fresh turkeys every year for Thanksgiving, and that was our big thing with turkeys. We would do that every year. We still do it every year, and it's a pretty big feat as a farm that harvests on farm and packages on farm. We're raising about 500 for every Thanksgiving, and so that's a lot of work.
Big week, yeah.
Anybody that knows turkey, especially if you're doing it fresh, I mean, they know what that kind of work is. And so the restaurant really wanted to have access to turkey breasts throughout the year. So naturally, my first thought is, well, that's not very sustainable for me. I need to do something with all that dark meat. And so we quickly figured out that if you grind it and season it, or just simply grind it, that people will love it. They love having a flavorful, textured turkey that they can purchase throughout the year, because people like to have it more often. It doesn't have to be just a special meal at Thanksgiving. Turkeys are really a very, very versatile meat. And really is a replacement, ironically, for the cow. A lot of people like to replace a lot of beef product with turkey. It's so funny that turkey graze a lot like cows. But we sell a lot of, and can barely keep up with, ground turkey. And we just have a simple seasoned ground turkey that we make, and those two products are always running out of stock. And so
do you do ground chicken and chicken sausage too, or?
It's funny. We love to do it. We like to do it. We haven't done it yet. And the reason is we can't keep up with our inventory of our current sales.
That's great.
So it's a great problem, right? I mean, if I think we're eyeballing the 15 to 20,000 range on our poultry production. And the only reason we haven't gone there yet is we're still working through manpower, more like family power, but we're still working through our ability to harvest and package that much product.
Yeah.
And so
you're doing the grinding as well yourselves. Is that right? Deboning and grinding.
Everything we do here. Yep. And so it's a lot of work, but it's a great way for us to recover value. And so, but we find that turkeys sell very well. We've started cutting our jumbo turkeys in half, anything that was over 20 pounds. Not all of them. We'll sell large birds like that, but we find that if we cut them in half and sell a half turkey, that people will buy those through the years and cook them. And so that's something that's becoming more popular.
That's great.
And the thing I like about the half turkey, unlike a 12-pound younger turkey, a half turkey, which it might also be anywhere from 10 to 12 pounds, It's come off an older bird that has a lot more flavor, has a lot more fat, and it's normally a lot better experience for whoever's making it.
That's
And
great.
so that's something that we've really are starting to move more towards, is providing that, half turkey throughout the year.
Throughout the year, yeah.
And so yeah, I mean the drumsticks, people love smoked drumsticks, and the wings make a wonderful broth. And believe it or not, the meat off the wings after you've boiled them makes a great pulled turkey. So I mean, we're finding a lot of great uses for the turkey.
That's great. I'm glad you and your customers can all agree on that. That's amazing. The thought of raising a spring batch of turkeys is always always appealed to me, but maybe never so much as now. My customers like my ground chicken products, and I think they're really good. And they're really kind of becoming more and more popular. But yeah, the idea of the ground turkey, I think it would just taste even better than the ground chicken stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that stopped us from going to ground chicken. It doesn't mean we won't, and I know we want to go there. I particularly want to do, brat, chicken brats and kielbasa and things like that. But that being said, the turkey is just so flavorful. It's really satisfied that poultry, sausage and ground cravings that they have. And now I'm taking a bird that we would sell on average for $90 to $100 for a table bird, and sometimes more, up to 120 depending upon the size. Now I'm able to get $160 to $200 out of that same bird, by parting it. So so it just makes more sense.
Yeah, it sure does. And you can sell it year round, and you got customers who are really eager for it. So yeah,
exactly.
The one ground poultry product that I feel like I have to get just for my kitchen is a duck chorizo. That's the thing I need to have in my life.
That's something I've heard a number of people talk about, duck sausages, and so I'm sure we'll have to try it. Our last batch of ducks were quite large. They're 6 and 7 pounds, and so they would have been ideal.
That's great. Well, I was going to actually transition to ducks, if we have a minute to do so. Were those 6 or 7 pound ducks? Were they 90-day ducks or 49-day ducks?
They were actually 56 days, I believe.
Okay, so right on the tail end of that first window.
Yeah,
that's great. They're able to size them up that much by then. That's awesome.
They grew way faster than we expected them to be. 100% honest. I felt like we were probably, I would say, several days too late on the harvest. Past batch, unfortunately, would have been best harvested right on Christmas, and our kids probably would not have liked us if we had done that. And so, but I also felt like we're a little bit new to ducks. We haven't done a lot of duck, but I feel like we were probably too much of a perfectionist when it comes to plucking, and that slows down our process significantly. And so I think, after looking at a lot of what is expected and on duck, and the amount of pin feathering that's still left on ducks, I feel like maybe we just were a little bit too anal. I mean, you go from doing Cornish crofts and you don't have a thing on them to ducks, right. It's just a different expectation.
Yeah. Well, I actually recorded an episode that will probably air after this one, and Ben Grimes of Dawnbreaker Farms, he went pretty deep into his duck processing processes, and he's processing 2,000 of his own ducks every year, plus another, I think, 3,000 for another farmer.
I found that the longer they hung in the cones, the harder they were to pluck, and so we couldn't build the backlog like we would on the Cornish cross of birds in the cones waiting to be scalded and plucked. We had to immediately work on this the minute they were bled. Yeah,
that makes sense. So how many ducks can you guys process in a day, or I know you're still working on it, I guess.
Yeah, the last amount we did was 150 in one day, and it was a long day.
Longer days, yeah.
Yeah, when we're running 100, when you're running 150 Cornish an hour, and then you drop down to like 20 to 25 ducks an hour, it's like it's pretty demoralizing. We're going to try it again, and I'm very thankful we didn't go with a larger batch, but we're going to try it again with a proper harvest date and see how that flock goes.
Okay.
And I think we're going to not be so particular about every bit of the pin feathers. We're going to,
Sure.
a lot of them will burn off while being cooked, and
right.
so we would just kind of focus on the large ones, and just not be so particular. So I think, again, just based on what I've been looking at, and it sounds like, I should talk to Don Breaker Farms a bit more.
Yeah,
as well.
Ben's a great guy, and
Yeah.
and he I'm sure he'd be glad to help you out. And
I really enjoyed talking to him at the conference, and he actually piped up quite a bit of great information in the exempt processing session that we had.
yeah, he's a great guy. So how many will you be doing in this next batch?
We will probably, again, just because we're a little gun shy, we'll probably just do another 150 or so, see how it goes, and then if it goes better, I think we'll probably just do multiple batches of that size, and that way we could have those harvest dates a week apart, and
yeah,
and not kill ourselves. Ducks, again, like the like the naked necks or the sassos, seem to be really versatile on when we can run them. So we could probably run them in different times that we may not want to run a Cornish. They're so healthy. I mean, they are just amazing how well they do. I really, really, really like the ducks.
yeah.
So in the pasture, I love them. Because we process on farm, you're going to hear some different opinions that you may not have.
Sure.
If I had a way to get them processed, I would probably run a ton of them.
Yeah.
But it's just because the bottleneck is so much, we have to get that figured out before we can.
Yeah, you can't saddle your kids with 300 ducks
Yeah.
without having that figured out pretty well. I get that.
They would be upset with us.
I could imagine as much. Yeah. So I know your broilers. You've got these pins that you've invented that are really great and impressive. And I know that on your website and a number of other places you've shared about those. We might not get a chance to talk about them, but then with your turkeys, you said you are ranging them. Is that behind netting? Is that correct?
Yes. So turkeys are so obviously from the brooder, they actually go into one of our larger mid-sized shelters.
Okay.
So we'll raise those guys in the shelters until they're big enough to not be carried off by hawks. I tell you though, turkeys in one of those shelters, if you ever need disturbance, man, they are awesome. I mean, they bring it down better than chickens do. And I think ducks would be the only close competitor. But you can bring these guys through areas and they just mow it. It's just really great what they do in those shelters. Yeah. But I like to get them out.
Not just the squashing and pooping. They're really mowing it down. Yeah.
Yeah, they really are mowing it down. And so I like to honestly run them there as long as I can. And then we'll start letting them out into half-acre paddocks with fence. Again, turkeys is a magic number. You really can't give them too much room because they'll run off a lot of calories.
Yeah.
You just got to give them the right amount of space, so they have plenty of forage. And what we'll do is we'll set up those half-acre paddocks and we'll keep them in there for 3 to 5 days, and we'll move their waterers around. And that's really how we kind of get their congregation moved throughout that area.
Mm-hmm.
And this honestly is probably closer to an acre in paddock size. But again, in our region, like our pigs, we drip water to the turkeys, stimulate their desire to drink, and we find that really keeps them healthy. And it really, that combined with grit, we've had great success, growing these guys.
And then with the ducks, are you raising them behind netting, or you have them in the pens?
Low density in the pens right now, just because they're a bit more flighty than the chickens.
Sure.
And so, but we're running about 100 per one of our mid-sized shelters.
Okay, so about half the stock rating of a chicken.
Yeah.
So we didn't talk about rabbits or egg layers, but is there anything about either of those you'd like to say, or kind of or what about doing those in Florida kind of makes it make sense for you guys?
So rabbits is something that we've been back and forth on. We're actually kind of slowing down or going to stop rabbits for a while, just because Florida and the heat is not very conducive for rabbits. And so they will grow, they certainly won't repopulate, but they'll definitely grow in the heat. But we're really just kind of, there doesn't seem to be a strong customer demand for it.
Yeah.
And so we've really kind of slacked off of that. Layer, of course, is a completely different scenario. I mean, eggs are so important, I feel like, to our model. And it's such a big part of when someone places it. I watch this in our pre-orders all the time. If I run out of eggs inventory, the number of orders we lose that week is very palatable. So
Wow.
I know I got to have eggs for people to place order for other products. And that's a big part of what we do. And so I think, if you're running any sort of meat operation, you really, really strongly have to consider a layer operation. I mean, those are staples. People, eat eggs on a regular basis,
Sure.
and so if they buy eggs, they're going to buy other things. If they get used to buying those other things, then they'll wait until you have eggs to buy them.
Makes sense. Yeah. So how many layers are you running, and how many dozen a week are you guys producing?
It certainly depends on where we're at age wise. We have about 1,000 layers right now. We're kind of, I think where we need to be is really somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000
Oh, wow.
to be able to keep up with where demand is. We don't have eggs left over from week to week. So number of production just depends. Like right now, out of that 1,000, there's 500 new pullets coming up. There's 500 that are on their way out. So
Okay.
we're probably getting this time of year maybe 50% lay rate. So it's so that right now we have a lot of feed going out to layers and not a lot of eggs coming in, just because we have pullets getting ready to come to lay, and hens that are not laying well because of the light in the day.
Okay. So you're working pretty hard to cycle in new pullets in a rotation to kind of make sure your production's never dipping too bad. Is that kind of your theory?
That's right. So we're basically twice a year we have a new group of pullets coming. So ideally we would have 3 active flocks. Well, 2 active flocks with 1 pullet flock, and then then a fourth process as the third comes online.
Okay. So you would keep a bird on your farm for 2 years, or if it's a started pullet, it would be a like a sub 2 years. Is that kind of how it looks?
That's right. So we're raising the pullets on farm, so it's basically 2 years.
Okay. And then are you culling them all out and selling a bunch of stewing hens, or what does that look like at the end?
That's mainly what it looks like is we are selling stewing hens. Is basically we will take that opportunity to harvest, a large group of hens, and then we'll put them on the site. We'll sell them, at a discount, or or have them throughout the year. The Instapot's been kind of a nice thing because a lot more people are starting to buy the stewing hen, and so that's starting to kind of make that more exciting to harvest them and less dreadful.
So let's just say for a chicken soup product, you're going to have feet, you're going to have backs, necks, you're going to have stewing hens. Do you find that selling stewing hens is depressing the sales of your other soup products, or is your broth market so good that you're able to just kind of move all that product no problem?
I find that people still prefer chicken backs and feet over stewing hens currently.
Okay.
And a lot of people look at the stewing hen as more work.
Yeah.
And so so it doesn't, it's something that sits in the freezer for a little while before it gets moved.
Okay.
But I have those that really like them, and that's what they like to get. So it kind of depends, on who I'm selling it to. But in my particular case, I'm just trying to keep them in there so I have the product variety that people are looking for. No matter what they're trying to make.
That makes sense. Dave, thank you so much for your time, and I enjoyed chewing the grass-fed fats with you. And yeah, it was great to chat about what's going on at Pastured Life Farm. I feel like
Absolutely, yeah.
I feel like it was a treat to kind of get to pick your brain and hear about dig into your production more, and
Well,
I hope that other people enjoy listening to it as well.
I definitely know I could. I'm sure we could definitely have some more time and talk more about a lot of this. And I quite enjoy it, and can go on for quite a while. It's something that I think you can appreciate. But if you have a passion for something like that, which clearly you do and I do,
Yeah.
we can spend a lot of time talking about the nuances of what we do.
Yeah, and I'm a big nerd for it, and I'm happy to do it anytime you want to. You're welcome back.
And that's it. That's my episode with Dave Shields at Pastured Life Farm. Thanks for tuning in. Check him out at pasturedlife.com. You can check me out at grossfamilyfarm.com. That's GROCE. And tune in next week for another great interview.